Greetings, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us. My name is Samuel Lucaton. I am a solutions engineer at CircleCI, and with me today is Sam Silvery, a solutions architect at Nirmata. Sam, would you like to take a few moments to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Sam Silvery. I'm a solutions architect at Nirmata. I've been a platform engineer during the .com, and during the .com era, I was employee number 10 at VIA Linux Systems. I've since sort of graduated to Docker and Kubernetes, and now I'm working here at Nirmata.
Cool. So the purpose of this webinar is to discuss how you can automate your Kubernetes CI/CD pipelines using Nirmata and CircleCI. And to that end, we will talk briefly about CircleCI Orbs. We'll get an overview of what Nirmata does, and then we'll talk about how using Nirmata in conjunction with CircleCI can make life easier for an engineering team. We have also set aside some time at the end for questions. So as we go through the content, if any questions come to mind, please submit them by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window, and we'll walk through the questions as time permits. Furthermore, this is being recorded, and we'll make the video available to you afterwards. Okay, so that's a lot of words already. Right now, are there any questions or concerns at this point before we dive into the content? All right, good. Looks like everyone is still doing all right. So let's begin by talking about Orbs. So for those who are not familiar with the CircleCI platform, to run your project on CircleCI, you define your commands, your jobs, and your workflows as code in a config file. A side benefit of implementing your configuration as code is that it allows you to modularize your config file. Now, this is beneficial in scenarios where you have, let's say, multiple projects that go through the same steps, or like projects that invoke the same commands, or that implements the same workflow. So instead of repeating that same block of configuration code everywhere, you can extract it and package it as an orb. So when we talk about orbs, what we're referring to is really just a modular, sometimes parameterized configuration file. In other words, an orb is just a reusable and shareable package of CircleCI configuration. So let's take a quick look at a sample orb. We'll see that it looks exactly like a config file, and that you can implement and parameterize all the same types of blocks that will be available to you in a base config file. In this particular example, we are defining commands, we're defining executors, and the executor is just the environment in which you want to run your commands. And then we're also defining jobs, with the jobs being just a group of commands to run. Each one of these blocks can include parameters, as we see here on lines 10 and 18. And now you can write any of these orbs to integrate with almost any service that you're using as part of your DevOps pipeline. Now, this slide is showing, this is not a complete list of the orbs we have available, but it shows a few of the services for which we already have orbs. Some of these orbs are provided by CircleCI, and some of them are provided by our technology partners, like Nirmata, who is here with us today. But the takeaway here is that we have cultivated a rich ecosystem with our partners, such that if you need to integrate any of these tools into your pipeline, you should probably check our orb registry, because there's a chance that a decent chunk of the configuration logic that you need is already out there for you. And so that way you don't have to reinvent or rewrite everything from scratch. So that's a really high level, real quick introduction to orbs. If you'd like to learn more, I've included some links in here to our docs. And once you're ready to dive in, there are also links to our orb registry. And if you run into any questions or you have any blockers, I've also included links to our support pages as well. With that, I'll turn it over to my partner from Nirmata. Over to you, Sam.
Alrighty. So, and before we can talk about Nirmata, we have to really talk about Kubernetes. Now, hopefully you all know what Kubernetes is. Kubernetes is an orchestration platform for your containers. But increasingly in enterprises and large businesses, people are starting to use Kubernetes as sort of the Ansible or Chef of containers. This is what defines your application, not just a container, but your services, how they interact with each other. And I can guarantee you, if you're running one Kubernetes cluster in your environment and you're using it for anything important, you probably have at least 7. So the problem comes as you start growing clusters, it becomes increasingly difficult to manage them. This is where Nirmata comes in. We give you a single pane where you can see the health of your clusters, a single pane where you can have all of your application configurations and you can deploy them out. And we also allow you to dig deep visually inside the containers that are running, the deployments that are running, the services that are running. And it really, really simplifies your Kubernetes experience. The one thing I find when I talk to a customer about what cluster they're running, they'll tell me, oh, I'm running this Kubernetes cluster. But in reality, probably your developers have their, hacked together, bare metal cluster running in their lab. QA might have cobbled together one on out of VMware. IT is actually using vSphere. The ops guys, well, some of the ops guys are using GKE, some of the ops guys are using EKS, and maybe the Microsoft's in there as well. So it becomes very hard to share all of your YAML all over the place and get repeatability. And really, when you're looking at your CI/CD pipelines, that's what you want. So we have the Nirmata Orb already in the CircleCI registry. It'll give you a whole bunch of examples and details on how you can deploy this. What does the Orb allow you to do? It allows you to create new applications in your catalog. It allows you to deploy those applications to your clusters. It allows you to update the YAML in your catalog. And then you can destroy your apps in your catalog and your running apps. As we're looking through this, there are probably a few, and as you're trying to use this, there are a few useful configurations you need. One I always forget is the Nirmata API key. This needs to be defined in the project's CircleCI environmental settings. You're also regularly going to use an app name. You need to make sure that this is unique for your application in both your catalog and your environment. You're going to need a Nirmata server. And then oftentimes you're going to use a YAML file to update your deployments or your stateful sets or whatever you're deploying. The thing to remember about this is you can always pull that YAML file out of your catalog, and you can actually build your YAML file in your catalog. So we're going to give you a little demo. Hopefully all the sites that I'm depending on are going to work here. So our first dependency is going to be GitHub, and we're also going to be using Git via the Linux console. We're going to use the Nirmata UI on nirmata.io, and then we're going to use the CircleCI app, and we're also going to be looking at the documentation in the registry. So what are we going to do? We're going to create a repo in GitHub. We're going to configure an Orb to add and deploy that app. That's going to involve creating a CircleCI config. It's going to involve exporting some YAML. And then we're going to expand upon that and configure an Orb to delete the app. All right. Let me adjust my screen so you guys can see things a little bit better here. All right, hopefully this is a little bit better, and we're going to increase the contrast so you can see things even better. All right, so this is the Nirmata dashboard. You can see it's giving us a lot of information about our clusters, our memory utilization, what our top containers are. That. You can see I've done a few things. My recent activity, Ritesh has been making lots of changes. We can see our alarms. There's nothing really alarming going on right now. This is our catalog. So this is where we store all of our YAML that gets applied into our clusters. We have environments. Environments are not clusters. You can see each one of these is noting what cluster they were deployed in. I can't see my clusters, and I can't see my cloud providers because this is a DevOps user. If you if we were an admin user, you'd see about a dozen options over there. And I can see my image registries. Again, I can't really manipulate these because I'm not an administrator. And then we can see our settings. If I were an administrator, I'd be able to play with roles, add users, so on and so forth. But here, I can only really grab my API key. So if we go over here to GitHub, we're going to create a new repository. We're going to call it, we'll just call it SAM CI Demo 2. And we will just create this. GitHub's going to helpfully give us a bunch of commands we can run to initialize our repository on our test box. And so we're just going to push, it's just going to initialize our repository and push in a default README file. We go back here, we can see we've got a default README file. So we'll go over here to CircleCI. So I've logged into CircleCI as my GitHub user. You can also use Bitbucket. And I'm going to go over here to add projects. And since we just created it, we'll have to refresh. There we go. So now we're going to add this project. CircleCI is giving us a bunch of default example configuration, but we're not going to do that. What we're going to do, we'll just start building. This will fail. So we'll make our directory. And then we're going to edit this. So if we want to use the Nirmata Orb, we can go to the Nirmata Orb registry here on CircleCI.com. And it's going to give us a lot of examples. It's going to define our parameters of our commands. And it's a lot of information here. This will really get you going pretty quickly. So we're going to go over here to my add deploy example. There are, if you notice on the left, there's an add example and there's a deploy example. This is just a quick way of adding something to the catalog and then immediately deploying it. So we're going to copy that. And we will insert that into our CircleCI configuration file. We're going to tell it to actually check out our files from Git because we're going to need that to be able to use our YAML. So we'll call this app SAM Demo CI, and we're going to create a YAML file here with our Tomcat example, and we're going to need to use Nirmata.io, and we're going to have to use an actual environment. So if we go over here, it looks like Ritesh has changed the names of all my environments. So, and then we're going to need to grab our environment ID. All right. So now we have a simple two-step process. We're going to check out our Git repository. We're going to deploy an app. So this is not enough. We're going to need to have a Tomcat YAML file here. So we can go back to Nirmata and use Nirmata to produce a Tomcat file. Now, normally what a lot of people do here is just import their YAML file. Maybe they've brought it from somewhere else. I'm just going to say create. This is going to create an empty application. I'm going to add a deployment. We'll call it Tomcat. I'll leave my replicas at 1. We want to bring in a Tomcat image from Docker Hub. And we'll use the Slim image. And We don't want to pull it unless it's not there. And we're going to expose a port. And then we won't do any annotations. So this is automatically creating a Tomcat service for the port we exposed. And then we're going to export YAML here. You can see it's exported the created Tomcat service YAML. And we also have the Tomcat deployment. So we just want the Tomcat deployment. We could stick them both in one file if we really wanted to. So now we have Tomcat. We don't have anything checked in Git. So we're going to add everybody to Git. Before we do that, we're going to double check our CircleCI config. We have all our indentation correct. We have a reasonable app name. Our YAML file is the right name. We got the right server. And we've set up our environment. So we're just going to commit that. And so we push that to Git. And if we look on GitHub, we see, indeed, it's picked up that commit. We go over here to CircleCI. We see a failed run because our initial setup had absolutely no configuration data for CircleCI to run with. And we go over here to our catalog. We can see CI test demo 1. If we wait just a sec, if we not deploy. Well, that's interesting. So I'm just going to manually deploy this by hand. See what's going on here. So we can see this is going to create our deployment. And in a few seconds, this will come back up. It does take a little bit for the there we go. Oh, I was looking at the wrong deployment. So here it is. We're up, we're running. It takes a little bit to update. If we just force it, it'll update. All right. So we've created that. Now we can show you how we delete things from our environment. Now, normally, if you were doing this, you'd probably have a point where you pause and you check to see if you just grab our sleep command here. So we're just going to add a step. We're going to spawn a shell and run sleep. This is going to simulate us actually running a some sort of QA test. And then if we want to delete our deployed app after we've run it, we can just grab from our example here this command, make sure we got indentation correctly. And then if we wanted to delete it from the catalog, we'll find the delete catalog example. And we're going to grab that. All right, so we're going to need to define an app name for this. We're going to call this SAM demo CI2. And we're going to pull that in. And we also need to define our Nirmata server. And this is going to give us sort of a simulation of if you were doing a CI/CD process where you built an app, you deployed it, you ran some testing on it, and then you cleaned up after yourself. All right. If we look here at GitHub, we can see we've added our next. So I was actually confused by something. So, all right. So what we forgot to do is we forgot what I remind you in the documentation all the time is you must set your Nirmata API key. So what you need to do is you need to add a variable for your project called Nirmata API key. And then you need to go to your settings, copy your API key, and put it in here. Otherwise, you cannot authenticate with your server. Once you have that, then if we go in and we just make a change here of nothing, we commit our changes. CircleCI is going to pick that up. We can see we're in our sleep phase. If we go to our catalog, we see SAM demo CI2. We can see it's deployed out there. We've got our pods up and running. Everything's working. So you can see in our catalog, we created a application with all our YAML, with all of our services and so on and so forth. That got deployed out to a cluster. Our containers are running. Everybody's happy. And we probably have a couple of seconds before we're going to get kicked out of this application. So how would this normally work if you were doing a full-fledged CI/CD process? So what you're going to do is you're going to check out your code. Then after this step, you would build your code. Then you're going to possibly you'll just deploy, maybe you'll update an entry in your catalog, or maybe you'll create a new one. And then at this stage, you're going to run whatever CI/CD process you're normally doing. And maybe it's a smoke test, maybe it's a full QA test. And then if that succeeds, then you're going to possibly update another application, or you're going to push it to the next stage of your QA process. If we go back here, you've noticed we've gotten kicked out of our environment. Well, I've got kicked out of the running app, And if we look for the app, we don't see my demo app anymore because it got deleted. And if we look here, everything succeeded. Look at our workflow. We can see that run succeeded. So you can see how, as long as you remember to set your API key, you can easily deploy into Kubernetes. You can set up a catalog app that everybody can use. You can deploy that to environment A. Then you can deploy it to environment B. And then if you're ready, you could even deploy it into your blue-green setup so that you can start having customers interact with it. So you've basically got a full-featured ability to deploy your application to any cluster via the Nirmata Orb. Actually, let's stop sharing and let me share that in full screen. So Nirmata is going to simplify your Kubernetes configurations, because I can guarantee you, if you think you have one Kubernetes cluster, you've probably got at least 5. CircleCI, of course, simplifies your CI/CD pipelines, and the combination of the two is really going to allow you to get a lot of flexibility in deploying to multiple clusters and being able to be sure that when you deploy something to your next cluster, it's not, subtly different. You can deploy from the same application. So you can try this yourself. Not going to cost you anything as long as you're careful. Sign up for a free GitHub account. I'm pretty sure you can do it with Bitbucket, but I've not tried it with a free Bitbucket account. Sign up for a free CircleCI account. You can sign up for a free Nirmata account. Go to nirmata.io or hit the try button on the main nirmata.com page. Sign up for a free Google Cloud account, and you can add and create a GKE cluster via Nirmata. Just be careful you don't exceed your free limits. And you can be up and doing this, in 3 or 4 hours, depending on how experienced you are with Git and Google Cloud. Did I go too fast? Probably. I have a blog post. If you just Google CircleCI blog Nirmata, you're going to find it. You can read the docs for the Orb. Just look for Orb Nirmata or Orb CircleCI Nirmata. I think we're open for Q&A.
Oh, that's right. Awesome. So thank you, Sam. And just a reminder to the audience, if you have any questions, please submit them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window. So far, we have 2 questions, and I have one for you, Sam. And it goes, since it is possible to deploy applications directly to Kubernetes using CircleCI, what are the benefits of deploying using Nirmata then?
So there are a couple of benefits. One, there are a lot of benefits to just using Nirmata to manage your clusters anyway outside of a CI/CD role. Yes, you can use kubectl to deploy to clusters. Your authentication's going to be a bit more tricky than just sticking in one Nirmata key and saying, okay, I want to deploy on the cluster A, cluster B, cluster C. Connectivity is going to be a huge issue. So if you've got a cluster in GKE, you're going to have to set up either expose that on the internet or expose it in a limited fashion. Whereas if you go straight to Nirmata, Nirmata's can already manipulate a GKE cluster through the Google API. So it's going to simplify a lot of your authentication and your controls, to just access the Nirmata API rather than having to access 5 or 6 clusters in 3 or 4 different clouds.
Gotcha. So if I'm hearing that correctly, it sounds like using just Nirmata just sort of improves that developer experience of managing your clusters as a whole, right?
Right.
Got it. Right. And so does quick, another one that we have in here right now is, so does Nirmata also support bare metal clusters?
So Nirmata supports pretty much anything that runs Kubernetes. As long as there's a Kubernetes API, you can access it. We also have specific plugins for various cloud providers. And we actually have a way that if you have a bare metal system and Docker installed, we'll build a custom cluster on that for you.
Awesome, awesome. It sounds great. Okay, so right now it seems like we don't have any more questions. So before we wrap up, are there any last minute questions that people have to throw out there? Okay, it looks like we're all good on questions. Well, again, thank you again, Sam, for taking the time to join us today. Also, thanks to the rest of your team at Nirmata for enriching our developer community by contributing this orb. I hope I get a chance to work with you more in the future. And to our audience out there, thank you for watching. And I wish you all a pleasant day. Goodbye.
All right. Thank you very much.